Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to our second segment of our Mental Health Task Force meeting that we had today. I'd like to start by thanking Councilman McCalister and Dr. Kamal Khalil for taking their time and energy to educate our communities and work with our community health partners for the better of our communities. There's so much work that needs to be done, but when we have such gracious people like the two of them taking the initiative, it's a start to the beginning, right? So I want to start this afternoon. We're going to touch on the subject of mental health and human trafficking. I do many presentations in the schools, churches. I work with the Mental Health Task Force. I work with the Faith-Based Task Force. I work with Detroit Way Mental Health Authority on projects, and I am also part of Families Against Narcotics. So my background is Beaumont Health. I work for Beaumont Health System, which is one of the biggest hospital affiliations in our area, dealing with opioid crisis, dealing with mental health, and dealing with human trafficking in an immense population. I am going to introduce you to Michelle Cavillo, who's to my right. Michelle Cavillo is a social worker at Allen Park Schools in the Downriver area. Michelle and I became very affiliated with one another and have been working as a team. I love this woman. She volunteers so much of her time to the cause of human trafficking and mental health and substance abuse issues in our communities. Michelle is on one of my 5 coalitions in the Downriver area, and she is the chairperson of the Downriver Anti-Trafficking Coalition. So I'm going to pass the speaker over to Michelle. We do have 2 other guests that will be joining us today. I'm very gracious to say Dr. Polly McCalister is here to help us. She will be coming over to the stage as soon as we're done with our slides here. And also Tina, who is in this area that can help you with any counseling or services that she has for you in human trafficking. So I'm going to pass it to Michelle. Q&A at the end. Love to hear. This is an open forum. Whatever you need to ask, if I don't have the answer, I promise you, I will get you the answer.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you guys all so much for being here today. As Simone mentioned, I'm a school social worker and a member of the Downriver Anti-Trafficking Coalition, and we work to help to educate individuals on human trafficking with a focus on prevention through education. So thank you so much for having us here today. We have a lot of information to cover in a very short period of time. I believe we're here for an hour total. So I'm going to try and go through our slides as efficiently as possible. And I am going to skip over some things that you'll see me skipping over some things. I know Tina was mentioned in terms of a support person. Please know that some of this information can be very triggering, and if you find that this information is maybe disturbing or triggering something within you, please seek support. There are individuals here who can help, as well as maybe some support people of your own. So we're going to cover what is human trafficking. We're going to talk a little bit about where you're going to find it, some warning signs and identification factors. We're going to talk about protective factors. We are a community. We're here as a community. I think that's one of the reasons why we're all here today, and know that there is a community of support as well as reporting and resources. We're going to start with the Downriver Anti-Trafficking Coalition's short public service announcement.
They're there. You've seen them. You just didn't notice. Every day, people just like you are bought and sold. You walk past them on the street. You see them at your favorite restaurant. You may not be wearing chains, but they are not free. You may see laborers, domestic servants, or commercial sex workers, but they are forced, threatened, or tricked into working against their will. They're victims of human trafficking. They're there. You've seen them. Last year, over 5,000 cases of human trafficking were reported. But most instances of trafficking never get reported. If you see signs that someone may be being trafficked, please call the National Human Trafficking Resource Center toll-free at 1-888-373-7888. They're there. You've seen them. You can do something about it.
So that's one of the projects that Downriver Anti-Trafficking Coalition developed to help spread awareness of this cause. So why are we here today? Human trafficking is happening in our area, whether you know it or not, and through education we can prevent. As well as you may be in contact with somebody who has been trafficked, has the potential of being trafficked, as well as a trafficker. So through education comes prevention, and obviously these are very important issues. Our goal today is to talk about what human trafficking is, and in relation to mental health services, talk about recognizing the warning signs, thinking prevention, and to provide you with some resources. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery that involves force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. It is based on a market-based economy with systems of supply and demand, with high profits and generally low risks. Now, the low risk factor, it's starting to change, but we're not there yet. Traffickers are profiting off of somebody else's vulnerabilities. We're going to hear the words force, fraud, and coercion an awful lot. And when we hear those things, let's think about this from the perspective of mental health, since that's why we're here today. Keep in mind that anybody can be trafficked and anyone can be a trafficker. So please wipe the stereotype that you may have from your mind, because it really can affect anyone. This slide illustrates the vicious cycle of supply and demand. There's definitely no shortage of supply and certainly no shortage of demand. So the buyer is flooding the market with their money to purchase sex or labor services for that matter. The trafficker or pimp is selling the individual, taking the money from the buyer, and the victim is exploited, bought and sold. I am going to show this short video. It's 4 minutes. It's from the Blue Campaign. The Blue Campaign provides a wealth of support, and it really does provide a very good overview of some of the things we may or may not cover more in depth due to time.
What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is modern-day slavery. It is the exploitation of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. Human smuggling and human trafficking are different crimes. Human smuggling is the illegal movement of someone across the border. Human trafficking is the illegal exploitation of a person. Human trafficking is about exploitation, not transportation. Human trafficking is a highly profitable crime and a violation of human rights. It occurs in every part of the world, including here in the United States. It happens in our big cities, our suburbs, and even in rural towns. It can happen to anyone. Human trafficking victims can be U.S. citizens or from other countries. Victims can be any age, race, or gender, but one thing they share is that they are vulnerable to being exploited. There are different types of human trafficking, including sex trafficking, forced labor, and domestic servitude. Sex trafficking victims are manipulated or forced against their will to engage in sex acts for money. Sex traffickers might use violence, threats, manipulation, or the promise of love and affection to lure victims. Truck stops, hotel rooms, rest areas, street corners, clubs, private residences. These are just some of the places where victims are forced to sell sex. Any person under the age of 18 involved in a commercial sex act is considered a victim of human trafficking. No exceptions. Forced labor takes on many forms, and it happens here in the U.S. and overseas. Through force, fraud, or coercion, victims are made to work for little or no pay. Very often, these victims are forced to manufacture or grow the products that we use and consume every day. Victims of forced labor can be found in factories, on farms, doing construction work, and more. Victims of domestic servitude are hidden in plain sight, forced to work in homes across the United States. Their traffickers sometimes take their identification papers and travel documents in order to limit their freedom. They are prisoners, working as nannies, maids, or domestic help. Every year in the United States, thousands of human trafficking cases are reported, but many more go unnoticed. That's because human trafficking is a hidden crime. Victims might be afraid to come forward, or we may not recognize the signs, even if it's happening right in front of us. We need to bring this crime out of the shadows. That's why the Department of Homeland Security created the Blue Campaign, to take a stand against modern-day slavery and help combat this heinous crime by raising awareness of human trafficking around the country. But we can't do it alone. We need your help.
Okay, I'm gonna just stop right there because of time purposes, but that really does provide a very good overview of what human trafficking is. This is the federal definition of human trafficking. We heard a little bit about that in the video. It encompasses many sex crimes. Can happen anywhere here. People think of the movie Taken, but they don't realize that it is happening here. For purposes under federal law, any minor induced to engage in a commercial sex act is considered a victim of human trafficking. You do not need for legal action to prove force, fraud, and coercion. This is a shift in thinking. Previously, individuals were charged with a crime, teens were charged with a crime. Now there are survivor-led efforts to combat this. And we're thinking more of victimization as opposed to criminalization. Children don't wake up and decide that they want to be prostitutes one day. They're forced to do it. We're going to skip this toss and turn, but talk and turn, but I do want you to keep in mind some of the places that you saw in the video where sex trafficking or labor trafficking can be found. Some of the places that sex trafficking can be found. A lot of people don't initially think of the internet. The internet is an open, unlocked door to our homes. So a lot of recruiting is occurring through the internet as well as selling. Of course, residences, people sometimes don't think of that. They're being sold out of homes. Of course, you have hotels, motels, truck stops, outdoor solicitation. However, the internet has really played a role in how that is changed. Labor trafficking, the federal definition of labor trafficking, similar to that of sex trafficking. However, it includes involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, slavery. Once again, for legal actions, you do not need to prove the use of force, fraud, and coercion if the individual is under the age of 18. Types of sex trafficking, we heard about this in the video. Forced labor, domestic servitude, jobs that are often hidden in plain sight. Involuntary servitude or debt bondage. Individuals are afraid if they don't do something or if they stop that they will be hurt in some way. False promises. They may be charged inflated fees. The debt is never really intended to be paid off. Places where labor trafficking is found. One of the things that really stood out to me was carnivals, fairs. I mean, we take our children there and the individuals are really in plain sight. Farms, construction, restaurants, hotels. The exploiters frequently target immigrants or economically marginalized persons, and often given just enough money to barely pay to survive. So we keep hearing force, fraud, and coercion. How does force, fraud, and coercion play a role in terms of mental health? Like, we need to think of pre-existing vulnerabilities. While human trafficking can happen to anyone, there are some individuals who are more vulnerable to being trafficked than others. And also, how do pre-existing situations contribute to the means of force, fraud, and coercion? So what is force, fraud, and coercion exactly? These are some examples of force. Using force, it doesn't just apply to the victim. If the victim are part of a stable or a group of women that are owned by the trafficker, the beating or torture may be done to or by another person in order to keep the victim in line. Fraud, using fraud to get someone to do what you want, may locate a small village or a poor area to tell someone about the opportunities or money they can get. False offers for a better life. Maybe you think somebody loves you. And coercion, threats of serious harm or restraint, a scheme or plan intended to cause the individual to believe that failure to perform an act would result in psychological, reputational, or financial harm or physical restraint. That's the actual definition, but what we're talking about is threatening abuse, possibly the legal process, arrest or deportation, destroying or confiscating documentation or ID. These are all strategies that are used. The International Labor Organization estimates that this is a $150 billion industry. And to put that in perspective, because I don't know what $150 billion looks like, Apple made $285 billion in profit last year. Starbucks, you know those are everywhere, they profited $61 billion. So when you think of $61 billion for Starbucks and $150 billion for human trafficking globally, it's quite a significant difference. Nike's profits were $36 billion. So human trafficking is the second fastest growing criminal enterprise, second only behind the drug trade. Lots of money. And when you mess with somebody's money, they're not very nice about it. As you can see, there's a number of goods and services throughout many countries, goods made through forced or child labor. And the International Labor Organization estimates there are 40.3 million victims worldwide. I've also seen the number 21 million. Sometimes the data, even from reliable sources, is not always consistent. And nationally, 1 in 7 reports through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children were likely victims of child sex trafficking. I've also seen the number 1 in 6, both from reliable sources. Of those, 88% were in the care of foster or social services or foster care when they ran. And I started thinking about that. And often there is a treatment service options that are available for individuals who have experienced sex trafficking, as opposed, like I said, that shift in thinking, victimization over criminalization. However, when you think about it, you're moving them from a locked facility where their freedoms are also kept under control. Isn't that where they came from? They may not see the intervention as help. So I don't know if that is the reason why. I'm still learning myself, but I think that that really is a good indicator as to why that might be.
I think we also need to add that when foster youth age out, they have no services. So if somebody's kind enough to put shelter or give them food, that's the beginning of the trafficking stage for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even if it's the barest of love, maybe that is the only love they've ever received. This information is from the Counter Trafficking Data Collaborative. They are the first global data hub on human trafficking, and they launched in November of 2017. As I said, the data is kind of scarce. It's hard to get good data. This indicates an age of victims, and you can see that there's a spike in the ages of 9 and 17, and again at 30 and 38, 18%. Children's age of entry into trafficking. You can see 33%, 15 to 17 years old, 26%, 0 to 8 are babies. the age of identified boys and girls. Over 50% of identified girls are between the ages of 15 and 17, and about 40% of trafficked boys are under the age of 12. That is why early developmentally appropriate interventions are extremely important. Thinking of that from an individual level as well as a community level, our churches, our practices, our institutions throughout the community, these are all things to address, and that is why prevention is key. We need to catch individuals early. The means of control, I think this information is very interesting. Multiple means of control can be used, and similar means of control are used for adults and children. Children are more likely to be controlled by physical abuse and psychoactive substances, while psychological abuse plays a large role in both. Again, these will help us to identify what things we should be targeting in our interventions and how we can establish preventive protocols as well as treatment. The famous Polaris map, what this means is this indicates, and this is from 2016, this indicates the number of calls that were made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The red, darker color indicates a higher volume of calls. This indicates the call level only. Like I said, there's no official estimate of the number of victims throughout the U.S. It's estimated to be within the hundreds of thousands. We're working on getting better data. And it's hard to get reliable data. The information is often sensitive. And similar to like sexual abuse, like people aren't open to coming forward for a number of reasons. We've seen a lot of the reasons in the Me Too movement as of recently. But it also is a protection of privacy and civil liberties. Some national statistics. High-level indicators indicate just that, high-level indicators. Moderate indicators contain several characteristics of human trafficking, but lack core scenarios of force, fraud, and coercion. Again, you're hearing that again. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 provides a three-pronged approach and includes prevention, protection, and prosecution, and there have been several reauthorizations of this act, so it's pretty in-depth, but too much to cover today. Some Michigan statistics from June that were reported in June. These are the 2018 statistics. And where do we rank among calls? We rank 6th. And why is that? Well, we are near the 75 corridor, our highway systems, truck stops, colleges. We're near an international border. We have a large immigrant population, drugs, and farming. Some Michigan efforts. There have been several efforts to combat human trafficking. Some places. We all know the Victory Inn, I think. 14 women rescued, as many as 20 were forced to live in inhumane conditions. Another Victory Inn towards the Lansing area. Shelters, this is Davenport Shelter. Girls were running away and falling into the hands of traffickers, as well as recruiters. Young girls were recruiting from within inside. And this individual was arrested. He was trafficking a 33-year-old citizen of China. Who knows if they spoke the language, who knows if they knew where they were at or had access to their documents, and this is what we're talking about. And you may remember the house fire of the individuals in Novi. They were trapped in the basement, often working long hours for this man's restaurant. So I just want to say, think of maybe an experience you've had, and does knowing this information change your experience or look at something through a different lens? We're not going to watch this one today. This is very important because often due to social stigma or misinformation, victims can be unidentified or misidentified. It's very important that we are aware of our own bias and keep in mind that behavior is communication. Keeping in mind that often physical symptoms are treated, but not necessarily trauma, and trauma is less visible. We have to keep in mind the role of trauma, possibly like the age that a traumatic incident has occurred, as well as were there multiple incidences of trauma. And also keeping in mind the perception, the individual's perception of the experience and how that affects their response to it and their treatment. Again, keeping in mind shame, stigma, and blame. Shame is one of the greatest barriers to treatment and healing. And keeping in mind that males may experience more shame, or if an individual is foreign-born, they may be experiencing more shame, as well as if there's co-occurring disorders or substance use involved. What are the red flags? They're typically operating with individuals with little safety nets, less support systems, less people to figure out, where are they at. They may be looking at pre-existing behavior and just make an assumption. They're preying on vulnerability factors, and keep in mind that the trauma can be so great that an individual might not identify as a victim, nor may they want your help. So sometimes all we can do is plant a seed, provide resources, and be available should someone be ready. And they may want help, but they might be afraid. Remember, we're talking about extreme tactics that are used, as well as psychological control. Risk factors, taking a global view from a societal level right down to an individual level. As a society, how do we normalize sex and the way that we treat our women? It's in our toys, it's in our music. And thinking about, from a community standpoint, are there stigmas? Is there peer pressure? How are our communities and schools under-resourced? How are relationships? Is there divorce or displacement? Are they dysfunctional? Do we have a skewed view of what respect and love is? And keeping in mind, similar to rape, many individuals know their trafficker. So this information is from the Counter Trafficking Data Collaborative. They say that 41% of individuals are put into trafficking by a family member, intimate partner, or friends. A very small percentage of individuals are actually abducted. And on an individual level, Simone mentioned foster care youth, individuals who are at risk, homeless, maybe forced to have survival sex or to meet basic needs, the LGBTQ population, or abandonment or rejection by family members. Maybe somebody is dating someone outside of their religion. Do they have a longing for acceptance? Is there an intellectual or developmental disability that's also influencing the way that they perceive social interactions? Is there a history of trauma? We know that plays a role. And are they more vulnerable in terms of being undocumented, language barriers, desperate for a job, or afraid that they're going to be deported or killed? Warning signs. Somebody had 8 chances to identify warning signs in this young lady, and these are mug shots. And I think that she looks high in all of them, and honestly, I can't blame her, because if I was forced to endure what she had to endure, I'd probably be high too. So when we talk about transferring from victimization, from criminalization, this is what we're talking about. And this is Grace. I did not know her, but I was definitely heard about her from people who loved her. And look at the deterioration involved, the pain. Again, on drugs, and I think she was 15 in the first picture and 17 in the second, and I was told that she died shortly thereafter. This is what this does to people. And again, these are mugshots. And again, somebody had 8 chances. Whether she was willing and able to accept help at that time, I don't know. But I know that we do a lot of blaming. And oftentimes the buyer or the traffickers, they get off light. And in addition to this, we have to keep in mind that individuals, may have been forced to commit other crimes that can affect the way that they move on with their lives, maybe fraud or theft. And it's the same type of psychological and or physical control that takes place. Warning signs. This is geared towards teens and adults. Is there a drug addiction? Are they living with someone who has a drug addiction? Do they have a fear of authority figures? If you're a medical personnel, don't ask questions in front of another person just to check a box. Somebody once asked me if I was being abused in a hospital in front of my husband, and knowing what I know about this, I said no, but if I was, I wouldn't tell you yes, but I'm not. But, like, why would I say yes? Do they have injuries that are unexplainable, appear malnourished, few personal possessions, or all of a sudden turn up with a whole bunch of possessions they may not be aware of, avoiding eye contacts, ownerships or marks, tattoos they don't want to explain, like branding, like cattle, an ownership. We're talking about somebody's property. We're not talking about a human being. You have to keep that in mind. And how do you think that makes a person feel? What can we do? This is the Circle of Courage. It's from a book, Reclaiming Youth at Risk, and it's a staple of Star Commonwealth. And thank you. It's okay. And it illustrates belonging. I am loved, helping to establish relationships of trust. How can we do this on an individual level, as a community, in our institutions? Mastery, I can succeed. Learning coping skills. And just learning. Independence. I have the power to make decisions. Taking responsibility and ownership, self-discipline, and generosity, caring and concern for others, contribution, service. Sometimes giving to others is the most healing thing we can do. It's so easy to help other people. It's so easy to give advice. But isn't it hard to take it? Yeah. I'm a social worker. I don't know nothing about giving advice and not taking it. Key considerations, these are very important. This might be the most important slide today. Availability and access to appropriate mental health care services. I mean, who's waited 2-3 months to get into a psychiatrist or to get somebody into a psychiatrist? Transportation to get there at a time when you can get there. What type of long-term self-care is available? Having the needed documents in order to be seen. Is there access to insurance? Do they have knowledge of attaining benefits? And can they attain benefits based on their legal status? Trauma-informed practices, the importance of knowing the history of past and current abuse and understanding how that violence and victimization plays a role on the individual, and if there trauma-specific care that's available. Culturally competent care and treatment options is vital. Are we using like Western traditional therapy? Maybe that's not working. Is there a history of oppression? Is there a language barrier? Are we acknowledging the social norms? Are we acknowledging the religious values and gender roles that may be needed in order to give appropriate care? And appropriate legal aid and access to legal aid, an opportunity to obtain a legit job. So let's say somebody gets out of the life, now what? This is how they survived. So what if they have felonies? Again, what if they were forced to do things that maybe they're not so proud of right now? How do we get them help so that they can get legitimate jobs? And peer support, it's evidence-based, and hearing and getting support from somebody who's been through it can help you navigate the system, as well as provide support, is vital. Taking a trauma-informed, person-centered approach is key. Rapport building and trust. How do you think trust has worked out for them so far? Probably not so well. Taking time to do that. No judgment, allowing them to feel safe and secure, not only psychologically, but physically. And speak to them privately. I mentioned that. Get an interpreter if needed, and provide support and safety planning if needed. Follow institutional processes for intervening. Do not attempt to intervene yourself. If you're not law enforcement, you can put your life and the individual's life at risk. If you're a mandated reporter, you need to follow mandated reporting laws if they're a minor. And if they're over 18, you may need to call Adult Protective Services if you feel that, if you have been told that that individual was harmed in a significant way and is extremely vulnerable, prone to vulnerability. You might want to take a picture of this slide.
Yeah, please take a picture of this. These are really, really important numbers.
And then the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, they are linked with local police. However, in an emergency situation, I would call the police myself, and I would ask for somebody, I would say that I believe this is a situation that involves human trafficking. Can you please send somebody who has been trained in situations of human trafficking? Because not all help is created equal. I've heard stories where responders have responded and actually had made the situation worse, and that could cause somebody to not want to report in the future. So that's important. There's also a text line that individuals can text. The Polaris Project is a wealth of resources, as well as the Blue Campaign. That was where the video was from. More information that you might want to take a picture of. This program, American Crime Season 3, provides a very good overview of human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and domestic servitude. You may want to watch it for more information. And self-care. We're not gonna do this exercise, but keeping in mind 3 things that you do that rebuild your heart. Deep breaths. We are a community. We are here together. I see this as a monumental movement that, people care that we're here today learning about these very important issues. So thank you so much for your time. We so greatly appreciate you. And
We're going to, at this time, ask 2 of our guests to come up and join us. I think we have feedback from 2 of the microphones being together. We have Dr. McCalister.
Give my patch on.
And Tina Partman.
Hello, hello.
Just wanted to recognize my colleague, your council president, Brenda Jones, and her chief of staff, Brother Stephen Grady. Thank you so much for coming out.
And I want to, the last thing I would like to say to you is that, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I want to be trafficked. I want you guys to, if you have any inclination to think that somebody is being trafficked, please use one of those phone numbers. It doesn't matter if it turns out to be a no-show. It's okay. But if we're not proactive, we're going to have way more casualties, and our casualties are our youth. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. McCalister.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming out today. What I want to talk to you about is before we got to human trafficking, there was prostitution. And we have a tendency to jump over prostitution and jump right into human trafficking when we need to go back and we need to resolve those issues right there. What I want to talk to you about is changing your mindset about prostitution. How many of you have been taught that prostitution is the oldest profession in the world? It's not. It's a crime. And we let it go on in our community. So when you ask people, why is human trafficking so bad? Why haven't the law enforcement been able to control it? We're not even controlling prostitution. I take my dog to school out on Inkster in Michigan twice a week. And there are so many prostitutes out there on the street, and the police department is right down the street. And I call so much that they actually kind of like know who I am now, and they're like, okay, we'll send somebody out. And their belief is that people want to be out there, so that's why they're out there. And that's not necessarily true. So let me give you a little background on why I do what I do. So I worked for the Detroit Police Department for 17 years. I was a prostitution decoy, so please do not leave and say that she said she was a prostitute. I said I was a prostitution decoy. And I worked side by side with a lot of prostitutes, and they actually became my friends. And you learned their stories. Nobody wakes up to be a prostitute. A lot of young girls end up in prostitution because they leave from a home life that has been abusive. Whether it's physical or sexual, they're looking for some form of relief, and they find themselves living on the street, and the only means to survive is prostitution. And whether we want to sit here and sugarcoat discussions, sex sells. It has always been a high commodity, and because we have not handled the ground roots of prostitution, we have human trafficking that has just soared. So being a decoy, you learn that people are out there because of drug addictions, and because prostitutes are devalued. They're devalued by the Johns that pick them up, and they're actually devalued by us. How many of you drive down the street and see a prostitute and the first thing comes out your mouth, she's a hoe? Nobody cares. So when we can have those discussions about what we're going to do in our own communities about stopping prostitution and having a home where women that want to come out the street, that they can go, and offering them some type of services, then we'll see a change in human trafficking. One, we have to learn to speak up. When we talk to victims, I always tell people, when you're talking to somebody, instead of saying, tell me what happened, simply say, share with me what's happening with you. It's an easier way to communicate, not only with victims, but with your children. You'll find out more just by using the word share than you would with tell. So in going through that process of being a decoy, you learn that prostitutes are people too, and that not only do they get victimized by the citizens in the community, the Johns, but the criminal justice system. So the first time that a prostitute is locked up, she's locked up for 90 days. She's given no substance abuse treatment, no mental health treatment, and now she has a criminal history. She gets locked up again. Now she has a second strike. It's just a repeated cycle. There is no assistance within the criminal justice system to bring them out and clear their record. But when we look at human trafficking victims, and this is not to devalue either side, it's to make you look at both sides and say, we need to do something. So one, we need to do criminal justice reform, that when people come into our system that have been used as exploited based on sex, there needs to be something within the criminal justice system that takes them out, clears their record, and offers them some type of mental assistance and substance abuse help. So before there was human trafficking was given the name by the FBI because they needed to title it as something, to do something. We saw an influx of young girls coming up. How many of you remember the Greyhound bus station where all the pimps used to park outside? I'm not the only person in here over 35, so everybody should know. Victoria, how old am I? See, best granddaughter ever. So I'm not going to date myself because you heard she said I'm 25. But we worked outside of the Greyhound bus stations because there was just an influx of young girls coming up from down south, coming up here wanting a better life. And there was just lines of men in really fancy cars, and they were offering these girls something that they didn't have. So I always, when we go into schools and we talk to young girls and when we talk to parents, the one thing that you need to always offer your child or somebody else's child is love. You have to build their self-esteem. Human traffickers look for the weak. Pimps look for the weak. So when you're having discussions about human trafficking, you have to talk about prostitution, and you have to talk about how they're combined. Because when you combat one, you can combat the other. But they all kind of like start with a need. The girls that came up here on buses, they saw a need. I want a better life. The pimps saw a need. I can use them to make money. And they did. They exploited them. And then it turned into what? Human trafficking. So if you were sitting someplace and you had to ask yourself, what's the difference? What's the difference? You have somebody exploiting, and you have them exploiting for sex, and the end result is always the same, as money. And we have to get to a point where we're teaching our young girls and our young boys that high-priced designer clothes is nice, but you got to earn it. I stress to my granddaughters all the time, so what are you going to do to survive when you get older? They don't have options to be strippers. They don't have options to be anything other than she wants to be a scientist, a veterinarian. They're dreams, of course, but we got to educate our kids on wanting to be better. Don't let a person offer you a pair of shoes and get your hair done as a means for survival. And you have a lot of girls, when we did training for DPS, a lot of the male police officers would say, you know, these girls are lured in, and they're lured in because they want their hair done, they want their nails done, they want to look nice. So a guy will see that and say, well, I can give you all that more. Once she gets trapped into being involved with him, then I need you to do something for me. So they get turned out. Now you're caught up in this system of you're selling sex. You don't want to tell people what's actually going on. So then it gets titled as you're trafficked. Well, you're still being exploited, and we still have to go back and use that big term, prostitution. And when we start being honest about ourselves, it's really the same thing. And if we have not done anything about what's in our own community, how many of you see a prostitute on the corner and you actually call? Nobody. Because you don't know if she's being, you don't know, you do? Thank you. Because you don't know if they're being trafficked or just being out there as a prostitute. And I tell you that to say, stop looking at it as, I'll call for a human trafficking victim, but I won't call for a prostitute, because you don't know the difference. What you need to do is make sure that you're vocal in your community and just say, we're not going to tolerate anybody being exploited. When you say exploited, it's different when you call the police and say, there's a prostitute on my corner. 9 times out of 10, it's a low priority police run, and they probably won't make it there before she gets picked up. However, if you call and say, I believe there's a woman or a child being exploited, I guarantee you the police will come out. And there is a difference.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
So I'll close, and then if you have any questions, we can go. And
Tina, I pulled you up to the stage just before we start our Q&A, just to give a brief introduction of yourself and the services that you have in this area.
Yes, my name is Dr. Parkman, and I am a therapist, licensed therapist, and I've had residential treatments for girls. And something that you said earlier, they aged out of the system. So somebody said power, money, and sex. PMS. Those are the 3 things that's out here. This is the street culture. And a lot of times, because of the street culture, the teens look at that. And it's important that the family have values, and if they don't, they go straight to the street. Just like when they go to the emergency room, they street them or treat them. So sometimes for protection, they do certain things. And because that's the value in the dysfunctional family, like the young lady said, systemic culture and generational cycle, that's how they're programmed. So that's their normal. So what I would do is have in the Agape house where the girls will come and have train them to be able to have high self-esteem and do the things that make their lives work, and even invite their mother to come in order to be able to build a very good relationship and redefine their purpose. So someone said, where there's crisis, there's business. Somebody say that.
crisis, there's business.
So what happens in the home? So the mother says, what goes on in this home stays in this home. So if the child is being raped or abused or situations, they keep it a secret. So secrets make you sick, right? So what do they do when they find someone that sees a gift? They prey on the gift, right? So I tell the little girls out there and the women, when you're gifted, trouble follows you. So instead of making it look like some type of situation where they did something wrong, you're a gift to somebody. Your parents just didn't identify your gift. And we don't want you out here selling your gift on the streets. So what I decided to do is to redefine who they were. Everybody's suffering from something, someone, or somebody. And some of these older women have prostituted themselves in relationships, and the children have what? Identified it in the what? Mother. Because everybody was coming through the home, wasn't what? A father. It was Uncle Bill, Uncle Sam. Now, how many uncles you gonna have? So the children are learning behavior, and in the learned behavior, they're doing what? They're exercising it. So it's important for us to be able to take these children and what? Take them through a process. And most of them have been traumatized before they got 12 anyway. Because when I went into the Detroit public school system, most of them were grieving from abuse, trauma, and all type of situations because the mother had left them at home. So by the time they get 15 years old, they're open for power, money, and sex because they want the what? Good life. Am I right or wrong? So what does the good life look like? I went out on Mack and Elliott, And I looked at the culture, and the culture was, if you got a good car, if you got a nice house, if you got what? Money. So how many people know when you make it rain, that's supposed to be the good life, right? So these children have decided that in order for me to have the good life, I have to have fast money. But if we can redefine their gifts and tell them who they are before the predator preys them into a situation, guess what we can do? We can make a difference. So I decided to go right on East Grand Boulevard and open up a human trafficking house. I want to get in the district where they're walking, because it's time for us to do some changes in our neighborhood. No, I didn't go to Dearborn. I didn't go to a place Southfield. I went straight in the hood. And if I could find something on Mack and Bewick, I would, because I believe that when we go into a area, we should be able to change it. Now, how many churches are in here? Anybody in churches? Faith-based ministers, anybody in here? Okay, so guess what? The church should be the spiritual hospital. When these children come in, we should be able to teach them what? How to do what? Take care of themselves and identify what? Trauma at early onset. I'm a professional counselor, but at the same time, won't they come to church before they come anywhere? So we need to open up our churches for information and dissemination about abuse and misuse and how to take care of ourselves. So these are some of the things I'm doing. I'm going into the communities. I'm walking the streets, and I'm getting with Councilman McCalister to be able to collaborate a systemic change in our communities. I'm not just doing therapy. I'm on the streets, and I talked to a prostitute yesterday, and she was on Mack and Mount Elliott. And I said, where are you getting ready to go? She said, I'm going to tell you the truth. I got this in my hand. I'm finna go around the corner, and I'm finna turn a trick. I said, but if I can give you hope, help, and healing, would you change? She said, yes. I gave her a card and said, listen, I am going to walk you through this. So human trafficking begins with bribes, false promises, right? And some of y'all didn't have false promises too, because a broken heart can really do what? Make you reach for love that is not in the wrong places. And not only that, whatever comes after you isn't meant to be. And some of y'all not 18 and 15, you 40 years old, and you still reaching for love in the wrong places, right?
So thank you, Dr. Parkman. Dr. Parkman will be here till the end if you have any questions. I'm sure she'll be glad to answer any for you. We're going to do a quick Q&A. While the four of us are up here, I have the mic. I will make my way over to you, I promise. So let's take that time, and then any information that you need from the four of us will be outside in the reception area. Be glad to help you whichever way we can. What you saw today was very brief. So, we'll get you as much information and resources as we possibly can. Thank you.
I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. As my friend knows, it's my habit from time to time to pick up and go to live in another city in the homeless shelters and experience what life is like, being what you call a burden on a system, because I have training as a minister at Liberty University, training Champions for Christ. Well, what I discovered in this last time I went to Cleveland is there was this gentleman that invaded my body space, was just a very large harassment around me. And what I did was, I haven't got out the hospital. I spent 15 days in Cleveland. I haven't got out the hospital. I learned that when I have a homicidal thought or a homicidal feeling, to call the authorities. So with this person that was harassing me, what I found out from the shelter staff is he had also threatened to rape one of the shelter staff, one of the female shelter staff. And I'm going to say something that's a little shocking, but maybe the woman from the police department can identify with me. The only thing these sex traffickers are going to understand, and this made this sound graphic, but this is the truth, is losing an eye socket in prison for what they're doing. That's the only thing they're going to understand. I mean, if you have situations like the NRA, if you put a gun in a family member's hand, they're going to understand that. They're going to understand, don't mess with Susie or don't mess with Karen. You know, that's the only thing they're going to understand.
Thank you, Ms. Wong.
How you doing? I had the wonderful opportunity and things I do by working for organizations and doing civil rights of meeting this young lady who was a victim of sex trafficking. And she wrote a book, Surviving Sex Trafficking and Living with a Predator. And she went from being in foster care to becoming into the sex trafficking to having children by men that were paying for her. So she escaped from that program, you know, a situation due through help out here. She lives in Pontiac. And next time Mr. McCalister and you guys do this, I'm gonna make sure I bring her. She's a wonderful young lady.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Madam President.
Thank you so very much, and thank you all for your presentation as well. And thank you, Councilmember McCalister, for doing what you do. I just want to make a comment as one who have also been working on human trafficking for the city and having human trafficking town hall meetings and working with individuals who have been human traffickers themselves. And just want to make the comment to you all, they say when you see something reported, it is so important that you do report it, because right now the statistics show that Michigan is among the top 10 of the United States for human trafficking. And so we do often see things and we pay no attention to what we see. And so we have to be the eyes of those that are out there to try to give them some help. Most of the girls that are out there are not out there because they want to be out there. Right. They're out there because they feel that they have to be out there. And right now I am working with State Senator Santana to try to get the state laws changed, because our laws have to be changed. They have to be changed, and they not only need to be changed on the state level, they need to be changed on the federal level as well. And we talked about why there are so many traffickers in the state of Michigan. And number one, we look at downtown, you have all of the sports arenas basically in one area. And if you don't know, what happens is when the auto show comes, the numbers increase, because you're bringing out all of these people from out of state who are looking for these young girls to traffic them, and our numbers increase. Not only that, we're right at the border over where Canada is. And it's so much happening that we would not pay attention to, such as, let me give you just one example. Metro PCS, how many times have you been in Metro PCS and you see a man come in there and order 15 phones?
Yes.
We wouldn't think anything about it. But 9 times out of 10, they're ordering those 15 phones because they're giving it to those girls. Yep. That's a cheap way out, $25 for one phone. And they're changing constantly their phones. They're constantly changing their phones. Those girls, we have to get training for individuals in the hospital, nurses. We have to get training for people in banks and credit unions, because they take those girls into banks and credit unions to open up accounts. And then they're standing right on the side of them. Those girls go into the hospitals. They're with a nurse for 1 or 2 minutes by themselves, where they can tell the nurse what's going on, but the nurse is not paying any attention. But after those 2 minutes, here comes the gentleman. And again, our laws have to be changed, because in Michigan, let me say, the way their time is counted is much different from how it's counted in other states. And so their time is running concurrently. If they do something in Michigan, when they go to another state, their time is running separately from, not running concurrently from state time and federal time. So sometimes they bring them here to Michigan because of the laws. And they can do less time here in Michigan. And so we're going to have to get laws changed, and we're working to get laws changed. But I know I made the story real long, but I just tell you, please pay attention to what you see. And a lot of times, like she said, it's the friends that get the friends involved because they say, girl, I can help you get your nails done.
Exactly.
Or I can help you get that nice jumpsuit or gym shoes you wanted. And it's the friend that get the friend involved, and the person is innocent. So it's not always, and the one young lady that was working with us was from a very well-known to-do family. It wasn't her family was poor and she had to be out there. It was her friend that got her involved, and she showed me some ID that she had when she was 15 years old. And the way they had her made up and everything, she looked like she was 25 years old. So pay attention to what you see, and let's try to get them help so that we're not among the top 10 in Michigan that we can get, because we have to save our children. If we don't save them, they won't be saved. And we are always saying that our children are our future. They're not our future, they're our now. Because if we don't get them past now, there's no future for them nor us. Amen. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
And Councilman, Detroit is third, ranking third, and 200 to 300% of the girls that are trafficked is under the age of 18. So by the time they get 18, most of them are addicted because they are given what? Opioids to be able to practice. So and then they are recruiting other girls, going to the schools, going to these different places, and becoming sex workers. So 200 to 300% of your children are looking for their girlfriends, like this was said, and they're saying, hey, you don't have to go to school. Matter of fact, you don't have to go to college. You can make this much money. So it's important that we understand the value system that we have to do. So what I decided to do is do peer support workers, get them certified as CNAs, peer recovery coaches, be able to make them feel good about themselves, get them into groups, and also be able to do what? Show them that they're a gift. Let them show love so that they can change their behavior, because they never ever had the love. And I appreciate what you said, because it's time for us to understand that they're right in our backyards and we're not looking. They're called trap houses. Trap houses in Detroit. Maybe 1 in every 7 house has a little girl somewhere around that needs your help.
Dr. Parman, thank you so much. You know, and one thing I want to add to what Dr. McCalister said, Dr. Parman, Ms. Covers, Madam President, is the fact that we are growing. Detroit is growing. Everything is moving forward. And there's some sick minds out there.
That's good.
I'm going to tell you, there's some sick minds. Madam President talked about the auto show. This June, we getting ready to have the PGA. And if Tiger Woods come here, can you imagine the number of people that's going to be coming here? And can you imagine the number of people saying, where that young girl at?
There you go.
Bring it to me. And then we got the auto races. And then we got the boat races. All those things is luring that export. Okay? So I just want to go. I'm going to turn it over. I don't want to get, I know there's some other questions going to be around, but we do have NARCAM training that we want to give you. But this, like I said, I thank y'all for this, because this is information. When you leave out of here, I'm hoping that you got so much information that when we have this thing again and we're looking at October, we're going to say, oh, we ain't got enough room. Okay?
And one final thought on this. When we're thinking about buyers, all walks of life and professions, you know, people that work with children, law enforcement, professionals. So we're talking about all walks of life. And I also wanted to mention the Salvation Army does an amazing job of training individuals, training like Comcast Cable, people who are considered to be less threatening and allowed into a home. Are there bars or locks on the inside? So the identification is key in helping to solve this problem.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We're going to move forward with our Narcan training led by, from the Youth Connection, Dr. Grenade Dudley. You know, oftentimes there's an individual who has suffered from cardiac arrest or is in need of resuscitation, and there's an AED machine of some sort. Oftentimes, Fade, too, what happens is a lot of individuals are not trained when an individual overdoses. This is a training that is essential and important for the rest of the community to understand and utilize this when it's a life-saving mechanism for those individuals who have overdosed. This may be your first time. Some of this stuff may be slightly complicated, but Dr. Dudley's going to do a fantastic job for us. Round of applause.
Now, how do I get the slide up?
Sure.
There you go. Thank you. Can you help me? Take this out. I like to sort of walk around, if you don't mind. When you signed in again, I gave you a pre-test, and what I'd like for you to do is to pass that in. Dr. A, if you could collect those for me. You filled them out already. If you haven't, do that real quick and then pass them in. And it's only a way in which we can determine that we've had an impact on this particular training and that you understand what it is that we're trying to do. So we really appreciate you passing it in. You signed in for us, and that's because of our funding, and we want to make sure that we have a record of all the people that we've trained to save a life. And that's essentially what this is. How do I move those slides? Great, thank you. All right, Simone, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Grenade Dudley, and I'm the president and CEO of the Youth Connection, and I'm also the chair of the Love Detroit Prevention Coalition. We are always looking for volunteers to help us to have an impact in our community of all the kinds of things that we've been talking about. So please, you've got a call to action to report and to be available and to do all the kinds of things that we're doing. The Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority is our funder, and we've partnered with the health department, with Dr. Ajibiji and Adora Ezeki, to look at ways in which we could help our community save lives, to train you on how you can save a life if somebody is experiencing an opioid overdose. We're going to go through what that is. And so one of the things they've done is to say, hey, can we reach out to our community in a variety of different ways? We want to make sure that we touch our community, our citizens, our churches, et cetera. And so, Councilman Jones is leaving now, but thank you so much, and thank you for all your work. All right, great. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about is prescription versus non-prescription opioids, understanding the impact of opioids, the rise of the death, the opioid-related death, risk factors for overdose. You need to be aware of this because that risk factor isn't in somebody else's home, it's in your home. Rise of heroin and fentanyl, signs and symptoms of an overdose, and overdose management. What you will receive if you fill out my forms, you're going to get a post-test and an evaluation. If you fill those out, you can come to this table, you'll get a certificate, and Dr. Ajibiji and I will give you a Narcan kit. And that's for you to take home so that you would be prepared if, and under any circumstance, that you have to be forced to save a life. What are opioids? Essentially, go to the next one, please. Opioids are chemically related to interact with the brain and with the nervous system in order to do two things. They can reduce pain. So I don't want anybody to think that if you got a prescription for an opioid that, oh my God, I can't take it. You want to make sure you work with your doctor, that you talk to your doctor. We heard that earlier today. We want to make sure that you work with your physician about how long do I have to be on this drug? Why am I on it? What is the dosage, and all of those kinds of things. So it's an interaction. It's a partnership between you and your physician. And so part of it is don't be afraid. We're not saying, oh, all opioids are bad. My father had to have his toe amputated, and he had a fentanyl patch, but he was under a doctor's care. And so think about it. When I talk about fentanyl later, this is something that can get absorbed through the skin to kill pain. The other thing that happens with opioids is that it also can produce euphoria or a high or a happy feeling. Now, the types of opioids that we have are heroin, morphine, codeine. We've heard about all of these. Methadone, oxycodone, Oxycontin. I don't know if anybody heard about the pharmaceutical company that's being sued for Oxycontin. Oxycontin is usually a short-term acting painkiller, but if you're talking about long-term pain, Why is that really, really, really heavily on the streets? We did a survey of the zip codes that are in our primary care area. The area that we're in right now, 48205, 48203, 48234, and several other zip codes. And we found out, based on the data that we got back, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of prescription opioids were in just those 3 zip codes. All right, fentanyl is another one, and we're going to talk about that. You've heard about, somebody talked about Vicodin before, narco, hydromorphine, or Dilaudid. Okay, so one of the things, the next slide, please. So one of the things we want to do is we want to make a clear distinction between what is a prescribed opioid and those that are not prescribed. They can be prescribed for moderate to severe pain, and they work. And has anybody ever had a painkiller? All right, so you know that they work. If you've ever had surgery or something like that, don't want you to be afraid, but I want you to understand the impact of what it is that you're doing. It includes the drugs like hydrocodone, oxycodone, codeine, and morphine. And the risks include misuse. If you took an opioid and you forgot that you took the opioid and you take another one when you weren't supposed to, you're misusing the drug. Or if you say, oh, my friend says she's got this severe back pain, I got something for that. Now you're the drug dealer. All right? If your name's not on the bottle, they're not meant for you to swallow. All right? If you don't remember anything else I said here, remember that. If your name is not on the bottle, that prescription bottle has your name and all that information on it, it's not meant for you. Because one of the things you don't know is what else I have going on. What else I need, and those kinds of things. You give me your pill and I'm like, uh-oh. All right? Anything could happen. So we want to make sure that you understand that. Addiction. One of the challenges is that this is a drug of addiction. It is an addictive drug that you become addicted to. Unfortunately, one of the things that's happened is that we have a lot of the pharmaceuticals, when they were pushing the opioids, did not highlight the fact of how addictive these drugs could be. All right, and the other thing is death. You can die. Trust me on this one, you can die. And that's why we're doing this training. And Councilman McCalister, where'd he go? I really want him to understand, thank him for how important it is to invite the public in to say, let's go through this training and make sure they get a kit when they leave. Okay. Overdose death involving prescription opioids. The most common drugs involved in these prescription opioid deaths include methadone, oxycodone, oxycontin, and hydrocodone. And this is this Oxycontin, and that's what it looks like. It's those pills that has the C and whatever else on it. Okay. Next one. In 2017, prescription opioids, I'm not talking about street drugs. I'm talking about those that were prescribed by a physician to a patient. Prescription opioids were involved in more than 35% of all opioid overdose deaths. This is somebody who had a prescription for the drug, and then they died. Overdose rates from prescription opioids has significantly increased among people more than 65 years of age or older. Why do you think that is? They may have forgotten to take the pills. They will be the ones that may get prescribed the pills. Anytime you have to have a knee replacement or a hip replacement or any other kind of replacements, they want you to be as old as you can be in order to last long as it can last. All right, so then if you go through those types of surgeries, et cetera, now you've got opioids that are in your house and sitting someplace hopefully safe. Over 50% of the deaths are from individuals' own prescriptions filled within the last 30 days. That's scary, guys. All right? So what we want you to be is informed and as to what it is that you can do. Now, the other thing is, the other derivative of an opioid, those opioid pills that you're taking, is heroin. Heroin is an illegal drug. It's a semi-synthetic drug and highly addictive opioid. Also, it's typically either injected, but is also smoked and snorted. Now, question for you. How much do you think an opioid pill will cost on the street? If I wanted to go and raid your medicine cabinet and you got these opioids laying around and I borrowed a few, how much do you think I could sell one pill for? 85, who else? 25, $20 here, who else? I got 35, how much? 25, 100. This one pill can sell anywhere between $60 to $80 on the street. One pill, all right? So now what if I'm addicted to this opioid that I got as a prescription, but then my doctor discontinued it or lowered the dose or said, I can't continue to prescribe this for you, but you are now addicted. All right, so then one of the things that happens is that I'm addicted now, guys, so I might have this girlfriend in this beautiful little golden sweater here, and I'm coming over for dinner. Where do you keep your drugs? In the medicine cabinet. Where else? Anybody keep them in the kitchen cupboard? In your purse, you know. Now, are they locked in the medicine cabinet? You got them in the medicine cabinet unlocked? All right, but I'm coming over, and I got to use the bathroom, and I'm going into your medicine cabinet. Would you know if I took 4 or 5 of your pills? Not at all. And then I'm going to your house for dinner, too. And where do you keep yours? Are they locked? In the cupboard, in the kitchen cupboard. All I have to do is troll my friends' houses, and I can pick up the drugs until you find out that's what I'm doing. There you go. Yep. That's right. Cable guy, cable girl, I don't care. Anybody, the guy that cleans your carpet, the person that installs your windows, anybody that has access, because you said, well, my bathroom is up in my bedroom, and nobody gets up there until you get to change the carpet, or until you get the carpet clean, or until you go and install a TV in the bedroom so you can see it at night. How many, unless you have a maid, how many of you then follow these people around and sit there and watch them as they do their job? 2 people in the whole room, 3, 4, yeah, right. All right, but you see what I'm saying? I have access. People who come into your house have access. And she's absolutely right. Sharon is absolutely right, because we also find that folks who are addicted, they get those jobs. One of the things that the real estate people are telling us now, if you are showing your house, make sure you lock your medicine up or take it with you. Because they're doing that now. They're going to these open houses in order to get to your medications. All right, now, how many of you, now you can just close your eyes, everybody close your eyes so they won't see who the drug dealers are in the room. All right? Typically what happens is that you have a friend that might have a backache, and you have an opioid or a painkiller, and they say, girl, this thing hurts. How many of you have given a pill or 2 to a friend? Look at all the drug dealers in the room. All right, and that's essentially what it comes down to. Remember when I told you, would you repeat after me? If your name, it ain't meant. All right, stop it. All right, you tell them to go to their doctor. You tell them I got some Tylenol in here for you, you know, anything that they can buy at the store. So one of the things that we don't want to do is that, unfortunately, one of the things that's happening is that the laws have changed with regard to prescribing the opioids. And with those changes in the laws now comes where you're beginning to get discontinued on the medication, or discontinued on the dosage, or discontinued. So you need to work. If you have been on these pills for a long time, trust me, you may be addicted. And what you want to do is to work with your physician on how you're going to come off of this safely. And you got to tell him, hey, I've been on this for 10 years. You're going to have to do something with me to get me off of this so that I can get off of this drug safely. So you make sure that you paid him to give you this. You need to pay him to get you off. All right, next one, thank you. The use of heroin has been increasing in recent years. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this ain't your granddaddy's heroin. All right, and the thing that's interesting about this, remember, our perception of these heroin addicts were all these old derelicts in the alley snorting and shooting up and that kind of thing. That's no longer the picture. And one of the things that we are seeing is that the groups that have historically have not been identified as heroin addicted are those who have private insurance and people with higher incomes. All right, so one of the challenges is that this opioid epidemic, it has no alliance to race, color, creed, income, sexual orientation, I don't care. Everybody in this room is a target if you have a pain and then you're on these medications for a long period of time. All right. So there's another drug that's out here, and this one is scary. This one is really scary, guys. It's called fentanyl. Remember I told you that my dad had his toe amputated, and when he was coming out of surgery, they gave him what was called a fentanyl patch. And since I had been doing all this stuff, I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? He can't be on that. You know, it's okay, it's a low dose, and we're here to monitor. You think I left that urgent care room for 1 minute? For 1 minute, I was right there. Fentanyl can be absorbed through the skin. The other thing that's really scary about fentanyl, it is a painkiller, and trust me, it works. But it is a pharmaceutical. If you ever have to be on fentanyl, you want to make sure you're under a doctor's care. Well, I think the last presentation talked about hey, where there is money and opportunity, there's going to be somebody to exploit the situation. There's another thing called non-pharmaceutical fentanyl. This is something that they have manufactured, and now it is being then sent out. It's getting laced with cocaine. It's getting laced with heroin. And unfortunately, and very scary for me, it's getting laced with marijuana. All right? And so part of the challenge is that it is also and can be extremely deadly. All right? This is fentanyl. Now, there's another derivative called carfentanil. Carfentanil is used to put down animals, big game animals. Tigers and lions and bears and elephants and rhinos. If you got to do it, you got to get the carfentanil because they don't like getting put down. All right, so if they have to do surgery or anything like that, that's what that is. We've heard a lot about the veterinarian's offices being broken into for drugs. What they're looking for is the fentanyl or the carfentanil, right? This is heroin. Now, carfentanil is estimated to be 10 times more potent than morphine. 10,000 times more potent than morphine. This is a dose of heroin that could kill you. This is a dose of fentanyl that can kill you. This is the dose of carfentanil that can kill you. So one of the things you want to make sure is that whatever medicine you're using is going to be from a prescribed source, a real source, and not given to you by anybody other than your physician. All right? You see the difference? Now just imagine if these folks who have just broken into a veterinary hospital and they decide to, create some medication for you to sell on the street. They don't know what the dosage should be for carfentanil if they've got that, or for fentanyl if they've got that. You heard about the police officer who went on a scene to help revive a victim, and the fentanyl was there, and he just breathed it in, and they had to use Narcan 3 or 4 times to revive him. I'm not talking about something that is, it's just that. I'm talking about something that's extremely dangerous. But this is what's in our system, and this is what is impacting our communities. So the risk factors. Past misuse of any prescription opioid is the strongest risk factor for starting heroin. If someone has been on these medications for a long period of time, have become addicted, and so one of the things that we're seeing, remember that rise in use of heroin is among people who had traditionally not used it before. This indicates that widespread opioid exposure and increasing rates of opioid addictions have played a major role in the growth of heroin. I have a slide that then shows, because heroin was leveling out, heroin was going down. All right, and we have a slide now that's showing that heroin and addiction to heroin is going up. Because, I forgot to tell you, how much do you think a bag or a little packet of heroin cost on the streets? Give me a number. $100. Give me another one. $10. How much? 5. How much? 25. 25 going once, going twice, 65. Now I told you your pills are costing on the streets between $60 and $80 per pill. I can get a pack of heroin for $5. $5. Heroin, and hopefully no fentanyl. All right, I can get a pack of heroin for $5. Now I got you addicted, sweetie. And you coming back, all right? So part of the challenge is if they get addicted to the opioid and they can no longer access the opioid, and then they go and they can't get through friends and families, they can't get the job to get into your house, now one of the ways and the quickest ways is to go to heroin use. Facts about overdose. Overdose is most common among those who have been using for 5 to 10 years rather than in new users. And the reason for this, say I was addicted 5 to 10 years ago, all right, I had been using for that long period of time, and you hear people who have gone through and gotten clean, and they're on the straight and narrow. Then all of a sudden they run into that old flame or that old friend, or that I could do it just one more time, all right? Now remember, my body has built up the tolerance to all these drugs over time. Now when I got treatment or I got into the recovery and things like that, my body now is saying, hey, thank God she finally stopped. All right, so my body is going back to a stasis. It's going back to normal. It's saying I don't have to deal with all that mess that's been in my system for all these period of time. I've now been clean for 3 years, but I had been using for 4 or 5 years before. Now I'm clean, and I'm running to somebody that said, just one hit, just one pill. All right, I take it. And all of a sudden, I'm in an overdose. Because guess what? I take it at the dose I was taking it at before when I stopped. Because I knew what I was doing before when I stopped. In order for me to really get high, I got to take a whole lot of this, or whatever that amount is. And now what happens? I overdose. Because my body is no longer dealing with the amount of opioids that are now currently in my system. Fatal opioid overdoses can be prevented. They can be prevented. Most overdoses are not instantaneous. I can take these opioids, and there's a process, there's a time lag. The majority of them are witnessed by other people. Most overdoses are witnessed by a friend or a family member. So one of the things I tell you, if you have a friend or a family member who may be addicted or who may be using drugs, or if you know someone that's out there that may be addicted or may be using drugs, they've got to go through a process to get off themselves. They have to be the ones willing to get into treatment and recovery. You're going to keep encouraging them. But if they don't, ask them, please don't use alone. Tell them to come to any of these community-based trainings so they could get trainings on how to save a life. So if they're in a room and somebody overdoses, even if they were overdosing or using, they could still save that person's life. If you have a family member, anybody, your kid, your family, your grandkids, anybody, you want to make sure if you're going to use, don't use alone. So you can save a life, and we're going to show you how. Okay. Michigan passed in 2016 what was called a standing order. This means that you no longer have to have a personal prescription in order to get the drug that can save a life, naloxone. All right, and that's why we call this a Narcan training. You don't have to have a prescription made out to Grenade Dudley or to Barbara or to Sharon or anybody else, because the state of Michigan has said, hey, we've got this standing order that now allows anybody that wants it to be able to get the naloxone. You know what's scary? This has been around since the 1900s. This has been around. What year is this? 20 something. Yeah, 1917, 1915, whatever it was. This has been around for a long time, and it was a drug that we knew could save lives. But then when it became widespread and huge impact, now it's a crisis, and now we have a way in which we can deal with it. Be that what it may, one of the things that we know now that you have access to naloxone. The Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, the health department, we're pushing out into the community to do these types of trainings to make sure that you walk away from this training with a naloxone kit, so that you have it. You'll have 2 doses of naloxone when you leave here. We got sent for 2 days to do this training so that we can come to our community to make sure that you would be trained on how to save a life. All right, and this isn't something that's going to happen on the street or happen in a back alley. We've had lives that have been saved in churches. We've had lives that have been saved, at schools. We have been lives that have been saved on college campuses. We have lives that have been saved on the streets. What we want you to do is to be prepared to help save a life. The law prevents drug possession charges against anyone who has this naloxone, all right, and because you do have a prescription. In Michigan, you have that prescription. And so this is a Good Samaritan law. Now, one of the biggest challenges that had occurred were users had been overdosing, and they were with a friend, and the friend wouldn't take them to the ER or call 911 because they thought that they could get arrested because they were using drugs too, and you got all these drug stuff sitting around the room. So one of the things that the Good Samaritan law says is that they cannot be charged or arrested as long as they don't have, like a case full of drugs and stuff like that in the room to encourage them to call 911. So the Good Samaritan law allows somebody who has witnessed an overdose, even if they were using, but not selling or having a huge cache, etc., that they would be able to not be prosecuted or taken or put under arrest. Because what you want to do is to save that life. And typically what will happen is that they will walk away and just let the person overdose, or they won't call 911, or they drive them to the hospital, drop them off, and keep going. That's better than at least just not leaving them alone. Acting in good faith. Anyone who uses naloxone or tries to save a person's life cannot be charged criminally or civilly if you break their ribs or anything like that while you're trying to resuscitate them in any way, or if they die. Because whatever happened, you got there too late or whatever. You cannot be charged civilly or criminally if you act in good faith to try to save that life. All right? Next one. All right, you can save a life. One of the things that you will have is that when you walk away from here, you will have this kit. And in this kit is going to be a two doses of Narcan. All right, and one of the things the health department and I decided, in the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, you can administer this Narcan in a variety of different ways. You can do it in injection, or you can use it as a nasal spray. We thought our community would be more comfortable with the nasal spray as opposed to the injection. We were trained on the injection, and my daughter's an insulin-dependent diabetic, and before she got the pump, we had to give her injections. And I tell you, it took a while for us to get used to the fact that to save her life, we had to inject her 3 times a day. All right, but it's easier to use the nasal spray. All right. Now, what naloxone does is that one of the things that happens when you take an opioid, the opioid then is a medication. Naloxone or Narcan is a medication that reverses the opioid overdose. You cannot get high from it. You can't use it to get high or anything like that, but it takes about 5 minutes to work. So when you come upon somebody that may have been overdosed, we're going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Now, what happens is that it'll stay active for 30 to 90 minutes. So if you walk upon a scene of somebody who have overdosed and you're about to help them, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick up your phone and you're going to call 911. Period, end of sentence. Dial 911. Somebody got to be on their way. Whether you believe they'll get there or not, you call them, or you yell out, call 911 and get me an AED if it's in the room. All right, but what happens is in naloxone, the opioids are on a receptor in the brain and in the nervous system, and it occupies these receptors. The naloxone comes in and knocks the opioids off of those receptors, and it will stay knocked off, depending on how much opioids or how much they've ingested, from 30 to 90 minutes. That's why you don't know how long they've been out, you don't know how long it's been acting in there. So this naloxone will be active for 30 to 90 minutes. It may take up to 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes for them to react to the naloxone. So one of the things that the opioids does, if I'm overdosing, it says, okay, Dudley, we have enough breath, stop breathing. It's all right, you can stop breathing now. So one of the things that happens is that it depresses the respiratory, it toxins my lungs, and it stops me from breathing. And that's one of the things that will occur, brain damage if you don't have oxygen to the brain and that kind of stuff. But now I'm not breathing because the opioid overdose is telling me, it's okay, we're cool down here, you can stop breathing now. The naloxone says, wake up, stupid, you got to breathe. All right, next one. Okay, signs and symptoms of an overdose. how do you know if you come into a room and somebody may have been overdosed, how do you know they're just not nodding or in an alcoholic phase or whatever? In an opioid overdose, the individual becomes sedated and groggy. Remember, that's slow breathing. What you're gonna find is that you wanna look for delayed breathing or very, very shallow breathing, all right? And so, and death usually occurs 1 to 3 hours, so it's not instantaneous. It's 1 to 3 hours after they overdose, so you have time to revive them. Remember, we're here to save a life. They become sedated and they gradually lose the urge to breathe. The signs of an opioid overdose: slow or absent breathing. They cannot be woken up. When you come on a person and say, Barbara's in an overdose, Barbara, can you hear me? Barbara, and she don't respond, and I'm yelling at her and she ain't responding at all, everybody take a fist. Put it right here on your chest. Now rub it really hard. Does that hurt? You ain't doing it hard enough. If you did it hard enough, it will hurt. All right, I've done it enough. Oh, jeez. All right, it will hurt. You want to do, sorry, but you want to do, I wanted you to do that to say that's how you have to do it to see if that person is going to respond. If they don't respond to that, that's another sign that there may be an overdose in the works. They're cold and clammy skin. They're dizzy and disoriented. They're choking. It sounds like gurgling. Remember, they're not breathing, and then they're gurgling and all of that good stuff. Their discoloration of lips and nails, they turn blue. Even black people, we turn blue. You'll find it. It'll be there. Trust me on that one. The other thing is that they have extremely small pupils. Go to the next slide and let's see what that looks like. That's a normal pupil. That's a pinpoint pupil. It is weird looking, all right? And you're looking at them like, hello? When you see that, then you know this may be a sign of an overdose. What's the first thing you're gonna do? Call 911. Now, the other thing is if you come upon a person in a situation that may be experiencing an overdose, your first thing to do is call 911. Your second thing to do is observe the situation that you are in. If there is powder everywhere and you don't know what that powder is, you step yourself right on up out of that scene and you call 911. It is your safety that is going to be paramount in this situation. If you come upon a scene and there's glass everywhere, in order for you to kneel down to help this person, I don't want you cutting your knees and stuff up on the glass that you don't know what was in that glass. You're going to step yourself right out of that scene and you are going to call 911. Your first response is to make sure that you are protected. I would encourage all of you to call the Red Cross and take a first aid class. Along with this training and first aid classes, you will be prepared to deal with an overdose, all right? So, opioid overdose, slow or not breathing, is not responsive. If you call their name or shake their shoulder, you call 911, you check the scene and make sure you're safe to proceed. You're going to see that again. You got to call 911. All right. You're going to check again for these signs and symptoms. Go to the next one. To administer the naloxone. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is what it looks like. It's tiny. This is it. All right. Just an example. You guys are outside barbecuing and you got to get the tongs out. What's the first thing you do when you pull them out? That's a good one too, but you click the tongs, right? Make sure they work. They work. Every single time they'll work, right? Do not spray this before you stick it in that person's nose. You do not have to test this. You do not have to get air bubbles out. Do not click the tongs, all right? It only looks like this. It's really small, and it only has about, 2 ounces or 4 milliliters of the active ingredient. You don't want to pump the pump because you're going to lose all of the active ingredient, all right? So you're going to take this out of the kit, and then you're going to make sure that you do not pump it before you place it in the person's nostril, all right? So I've got my dude here. And the other thing you're going to get in this kit are gloves. Put them on. You're also going to get a face shield. And you want to make sure that you use it. Because what is this one thing that we said that happens? How does a person die? They stop breathing. So you administer your Narcan, and then you're going to have to breathe for them. All right? So I got Johnny Overdose here. And he looks in here. Hold that for me. Looks in bad shape, right? And so one of the things I want to do is I'm going to put my gloves on. I don't want to waste them. I'm going to get my Narcan out, and I'm going to lift his chin. All right, I want to lift his chin, support his head, and then I'm going to pinch his nose. I'm going to take the mouth shield that you get in this kit and put over his mouth. You got your gloves on, so what if he's thrown up? Don't put your lips on it. All right, you're going to use your finger with your glove finger, and you're going to scoop out whatever may be in his mouth, all right, or clean off his nose. You're going to use your gloves to do that. You're not going to do that with your bare fingers, okay? And then you're going to put the face shield, because the face shield has got directions on how you put it on. You're going to put that over his mouth. You're going to lift his chin. You're going to pinch his nose, and you're going to breathe for him. And you're going to breathe in a way that you see that his chest rises, his or her chest rises. You see that? All right. You want to keep an eye to see, did the chest rise? And you want to breathe. Thank you. We're going to breathe on behalf of that person, because one of the things that the opioid is doing is it's telling him, hey, you don't have to breathe anymore. And we're saying, nope, that's not going to be the case. You got to breathe, good buddy. All right, you hold the nasal spray. I showed you how to do it. You see how small it is, and you are not going to pump it before you insert it into the nostril. So you're going to take that, first you're going to administer your Narcan. You're going to lift his head. And the reason why you have to do that, is that if you're sitting here like this, nothing's going to get in here. And I'm not faking the talking, so you got to make sure that the airway is clear, and you want to lift his head so that you could do it. You're going to put it in one nostril, and then you're going to spray it in. Insert it in the nostril, and then you spray it in, all right? And then you're going to breathe for them. All right, and that's going to be really important for you to do. And it's not scary, guys. We could do this. All right, go to the next one for me. All right, you do not prime the pump. I told you that, right? Yeah. Do not squirt my Narcan into the air. Tilt the victim's head back, press the pump firmly into the nostril to give the dose of Narcan. And that's Narcan is the name of the naloxone that we're using. All right, if you have to leave the scene, if you, for whatever reason, you aren't getting something in, the signal in your phone, and you're there by yourself, you've tried to revive this person, now you're out of breath, you have to leave the scene. You want to make sure you put them in what is called the recovery position. And the recovery position prevents them from gagging or swallowing if they throw up or come to or anything like that, and they're on their side. So if you have to leave the scene, you place them in the recovery position. You can go on the internet and you can, check out on Google the recovery position. It'll show you what to do and how to do it. Okay. All right, we did that. Now you got the rescue breaths. You want to give 2 quick breaths followed by 1 breath every 5 seconds while watching the chest rise. And you saw what I did there. You want to stay calm, and you want to remember to breathe yourself. All right. The other thing you might want to do, usually the chest compressions, if you have the AED device and you've called for it and you hook the person up to it and it asks you to start giving the chest compressions, one of the things that you want to do with your, when you take the first aid course, in those chest compressions, you got to press down hard. All right. You want to press down hard so that this person is, okay. All right, and you want to press down hard. And if you're doing this, and you can do it to, I don't want to say the song. One song is Another One Bites the Dust, but you want to do it to that, right? But when you continue to press down hard, you're breathing for them, etc., you're going to be losing steam. Now, 5 to 10 minutes before that naloxone works. If it doesn't work within that 5 minutes, you want to administer your second dose of naloxone, all right? And you do it exactly the same way. So now you got 2 doses. What if they were really overdosed? Remember, this guy had to take 2 or 3. That's why you've already called 911, and hopefully they are out there and they're on their way. If they are not responsive within the 2 to 3 minutes, you administer your second dose, and you use rescue breathing in between doses. If no heartbeat, chest compressions. All right, go to the next one. All right, you stay with the person. The naloxone may wear off, all right, in 30 to 90 minutes. So what if the person comes to? Do you think they're going to thank you? You just knocked their high right out of the box. All right, it's gone. and they may not be very grateful. So what you want to do, if they start coming to, you want to just sort of step back, protect yourself, make sure that they're safe and don't roll off a floor or table or anything like that. But the challenge is that when they come to, if 911 has not gotten there, you want to encourage them to go get help. Because you don't know, because remember, our naloxone is only going to last for that, 30 to 90 minutes. And if it wears off and they still have more opioids in their system and it reoccupies those receptors, they could go back into an overdose, all right? Administering naloxone to opioid-dependent individuals can cause withdrawal symptoms. So they may be flailing about, they may be angry. Whatever it is, don't take it personal. It has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with you just saved their lives or anything like that. Don't take it personal. You just saved their lives, and you're encouraging them to go ahead for treatment. Naloxone has no effect on someone who has not had opioids in their system. It will not work if they are overdosing on cocaine. It will not work if they are overdosing on methamphetamines or anything else. It won't work. It has to be an opioid. If you administer the naloxone in good faith, because you don't know what they took, it may not help them in that regard, but it won't hurt them. If they're just passed out in alcohol for whatever else it is, if you administer it and you administer it in good faith, it ain't gonna hurt them at all. It's like squirting water up their nose, and you know how that gets when you get water up your nose. Ooh, that's irritating. All right, so no, if it's a non-opioid pill or alcohol, it won't hurt them, but it won't help them. All right, so if they're overdosing on cocaine, at that point in time, there's absolutely nothing that you could do. If you think that the opioids are in any way involved with the overdose, it's worth giving them the naloxone because it won't hurt them, and remember, you're administering it in good faith. What are you going to do? All right. Call 911. So, we are funded by the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, and we are in partnership with the Detroit Health Department. And this is going to represent almost 400 community people that we have trained, including youth. It is important. I mean, we've trained our youth as young as 10 years old. All right, especially in the communities. Doc said before, she's in this community, and our kids are exposed to the same kinds of things that you see on the streets, the prostitution, they're in those houses, trafficking, all of those kinds of things. Train them. Send them to one of the community-based trainings. Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority, that's our number, 24-hour access, 1-800-241-4949. You can call and find out when the next community-based training is going to be. Or you can call the health department. They have a record of all the ones that we are scheduling. Or if you want to schedule one for your church or community group, all you have to do is give us a call. All right, do it, because you can be the person who saved a life. Yes, ma'am. Yes. You do it in the other nostril. Her question was, if you have to repeat the administration of the naloxone, you then insert the second dose in the other nostril, not the same one that you used before. Good question, Mary. Thank you. Yes, sir.
How long does that last?
It's only going to last 30 to 90 minutes. Oh, prescription?
Yeah, before you, let's say you have it for a year. You have the naloxone kit for a year. And then somebody comes in, is it still good?
Okay, there is an expiration date on the box. There's an expiration date on the box. If you don't have anything else, use it. Better safe than sorry. Now, again, you can go to your pharmacist, or you can go to your pharmacist. One of the things that we're trying to encourage, that if a doctor is writing a prescription for an opioid, that they also write the script for naloxone. All right, or recommend that you also get the naloxone. All right, it's just a safety precaution. And so part of one of the things that we're trying to do is that you can go, it's covered on your insurance. Your insurance will pay for it. Most of the insurances will pay for it now if you aren't at a community group to get it and you need another kit. But it is also a cost. The cost to me with my insurance is $60. It's a copay for me. All right, so that's why I'm going to find all the free ones I can get. And the other thing is that with Medicaid, I think it's free. We are working with pharmacies and our pharmacists. We're working with Rite Aid, and we have a pharmacist subcommittee to help us work with some of the issues relating to the standing order. Because if I go in and I ask for, because they have to record, if I go in and have a prescription and get it from my pharmacist with my name, et cetera, they have to record that. And then now I'm at risk for life insurance or anything else. And so we're trying to figure out how do we work around those kinds of issues, because we have a lot of people in the community that we're encouraging to get the naloxone. Yes, sir.
Does it look like we're going to win this battle, and what's the next battle on the horizon?
For me, failure is never final. And for me, I got to keep going whether I win it or not. All right, I can't tell you absolutely we're going to win it. As long as I have people like you coming to these types of trainings, hearing all the things that were brought together on trafficking and all of those kinds of things, and we give you a call to action. You have to act. I think you said, it was said before, what are you going to do? All right, what are you going to do to help us make a difference? Because the battle is won when everybody pulls together to help us win it. All right, so I'm going to do a call to action. April 27th, last Saturday, almost done, I'm wrapping it up. April 27th, we had a drug take back. How many of you have old prescriptions still sitting in that medicine cabinet? Mm-hmm. You put them in your car. You were on your way to a take back and didn't make it. All right, here's my call to action. You have a doTERRA bag, you can put those pills in the doTERRA bag. Between now, the next DEA drug take back is in October. I think it's October 26th, and we can really confirm that day. Dr. Ajibiji and I in the health department, we've talked with Councilman McCalister. We want you, we did a take back and set up a whole display at every police precinct in the city of Detroit. As a result of that effort, we increased the amount of pills that were taken back by 37%. We need to do better. We need to get these drugs out of the homes and just sitting there in your car waiting to be taken back. Now, you have the doTERRA bag, you can put them in, add the water, and throw them away. Do not put loose pills or those pills in the trash. Don't do it. Do not flush them down the toilet. You hear me? What you can do if you have a cat, or go get some kitty litter, put them in kitty litter, preferably used, all right, and then throw them away. Bag it up and then throw it away. Or get coffee grounds. Put them in the coffee grounds because it begins to deactivate the active ingredient in it, then throw them away. But if you have them and we get to the October 26th drug take back, I want to make sure each and every one of you, I'm going to sit there with, I'm going to send volunteers, I'm going to get pictures and say these are the people that should be showing up at every precinct to turn those pills in. If you are going to turn them in, do not drop the prescription bottle off with your name and information on the bottle. Tear that off, scribble it out, blacken it out. And all we're taking back or any prescription, it's not just opioids, any prescription or over-the-counter pill. We do not want patches, we do not want creams, we do not want alcohol, we just want the pills. All right? Even if they're in blister packs, we want to make sure that you bring them. So please, the call to action is 1, stop being drug dealers. 2, get rid of those drugs responsibly. And 3, participate in the DEA drug take back. Thank you. Oh, there's a question. I'm sorry. Oh, where's my little guy? Yeah, get my little guy with the question mark. How do I do this? Where'd he go? Oh, there's a post-test, Dr. Ajibiji. Before you go, in order to get your Narcan kit, you have to fill out 2 things. You have to fill out my post-test, and you have to fill out the evaluation. And then after that, I don't want to interrupt the next speaker, so I was the last speaker, so after that, once you fill it out, you can come to this table, and Dr. Ajibiji and I will give you a Narcan kit. You also have to make sure you have signed in. That's how I get funding to continue to do this for free to the community. I'm sorry, what's your question?
Do pharmacies take back prescriptions?
Some pharmacies do.
Okay.
And they may have to be prescriptions that you order from them. I know Rite Aid does. And so maybe some of the independent pharmacies, but talk to your pharmacist. If you get a prescription from that pharmacist, ask them, will they take it back? There are two different sheets. One is a post-test and one is an evaluation. You have to fill out both if you want my Narcan kit. Yes, ma'am. That's the post-test. That's what you got to fill that out, and then an evaluation. All right, the evaluation is coming this way. If you got 2 post-tests, just pass it down.
Okay, my question is,
where'd they go?
right here. Okay, my question is, are you giving this information about the disposal of the pills to the senior living facilities when people die? You know how sometimes those are left there, and so for the service coordinators to make sure that this is happening, or that family member being made aware that this is how you should dispose of those medications.
Right. All of the nursing homes, those types of facilities, they are bound by law and how they're supposed to dispose of all of those drugs. We are going to be, our health department, we are reaching out. We are saying, hey, here's an opportunity to bring them any police precinct just for that day. Do not go up to the precinct and bring your pills up there unless it's a DEA take back. And hopefully we'll do a really good job of advertising the Take Back Day. So if you have a phone with a calendar, put October 26th as the tentative DEA Drug Take Back Day. And this is a Take Back Day across the country.